This is Colonel Angie Robertson, AMCA1, and this is the Bedrock Podcast.
I'm Tech Sergeant Laura Beckley, and I am here with Colonel Angie Robertson, who is the AMCA1 Director. AMCA1 is responsible for manpower, personnel, and services. So thank you, ma'am, for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, very glad to. And you brought Chief Featherstone with you.
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about him?
So, Chief, for those that probably recognize the name, Chief Greg Featherstone used to be actually here stationed at Dover before coming up to AMC. But in the role that he serves at AMC, he's my senior enlisted leader, as well as dual-hatted with being the chief for our readiness section at AMC A1.
So he's a busy man.
He's a very busy man.
And unfortunately, he could not join us for the podcast, but we always want to give him a little bit of love. You
That's
guys
right.
have been around Dover now for 2 days. We have one more.
We have, actually today is our last day. We got here on Monday, and we had the great opportunity of seeing the amazing work that happens over at AFMAO and AFMES to see some of the AMC airmen who are part of that mission. And so the other couple of days have been spent with the Force Support Squadron and seeing the great work that those airmen do.
Awesome. So you're a big fan of Team Dover?
Big fan, huge fan. I will tell you, this is an amazing mission that's here on the installation.
We like it too, and we're glad that you could come and enjoy it with us and enjoy a breakfast sandwich at Muggs and a salad at the DFAC. Check out the fitness center in Johnny Fitness. Ran the whole gamut. But the purpose of the podcast today is not necessarily about your visit, but to talk about something that is a little bit taboo, actually, that for a long time, we've kind of avoided these types of conversations, but today you really want to dig into it. And the focus of today's podcast is going to be based on a song that you're really partial to, Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come, which was released in 1964 after his death. And it's a pretty pointed account of the civil rights movement that has a lot of brooding tones of oppression with a really nice hint of hope and looking towards the future at the end of each stanza. Why this song?
So let me first start by saying that I highly encourage folks who may not be familiar with the song to pull it up on YouTube, pull it up on Spotify or whatever your means of listening to songs. But I highly recommend people to listen to it, even if they've heard it before, but to just listen to it again. To me, I see this song as being an ageless song in that, so first, the instrumentals is what grabbed me from the very beginning. It starts out with, it sounds like an orchestra, so it's pretty cool to listen to the sounds just by itself. But the lyrics and the message behind it is pretty powerful. And yes, I think initially it was during the civil rights movement, but ultimately it's a song that you can listen to today, and that's why I say it's an ageless song, because ultimately it's about providing hope and encouragement and a promise of a change is going to come no matter what the current situation or the current circumstances are, to be able to live and rise above that. So if you listen to the song, it's about 3 minutes long, not, quick, easy listen. 5 stanzas or so, but at the end of each stanza, and you mentioned it, but he always makes the comment that a change is going to come. And so for me, some people may look at it as being oppressive, but at the end of the day, he gives me that hope and that encouragement that there's a brighter future for us all.
In the first stanza of this song, he talks about, I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. And then he wraps that sentiment up with, but a change is going to come. This is one of those stanzas that you kind of pointed out. What about that, resonated with you?
So for me, when I think about that particular stanza, he was born at a certain point in time. As he mentioned, he was born in the tent, and the aspect of the river flowing and the river running, I look at that as a a journey in life. And for him, his words were significant to me because I do look at life as a journey. I look at life as always moving, and there's always that constant flow. And most importantly, for him, he mentioned I've been running ever since, and that is indication of when this song came out, it was towards the end of the civil rights movement, and it was a significant point in his life of talking about the injustices that happened along his lifetime, and he's been running. And so for me, it was significant because I was born in the 70s, and it was just a decade after the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And so having that stanza to reflect that change is going to come despite some of the injustices that took place during the civil rights movement, even though he's been running from that since the beginning of his time on earth.
And change has come to some extent. So you are a black female and mm-hmm. a colonel, which is awesome. Good for you.
Thank you.
Colonel's not easy. I myself am a female. I'm a member of the LGBT community. And so seeing, we don't ask to be born a certain way. I mean, I'm sure you didn't, come from your mom and you're like, man, I wanted to be black, and thank goodness I was. It just happens, right? That's that river that flows. People don't ask to be a certain color or a certain gender or a certain sexuality. The river flows, and you got to keep running. And so I see where you're going with the idea, that symbolism is really ringing true. The third stanza as well stuck out because of a story from your childhood in South Carolina. The stanza goes, I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but change is going to come. So this is a personal one for mm-hmm. you. Where is that coming from?
So for me, again, born in the 70s, not too far from after the end of the civil rights movement. Being a young kid growing up in South Carolina, I had friends of, when you're a kid, period, you don't look at color. You don't look at the fact that, someone's white, black, green, yellow. You just know that that is a good friend of mine. And so I remember I must have been about 7, 8, maybe 9 years old, and I was invited to one of my classmates' house to play with 3 other of my friends. And my mom, when I went home to ask if I could go to my friend's house, she was a little apprehensive because she wasn't familiar with who the parents were. And I was going to say, if you know any mom, the mom will always ask, who are they and where do they live? And so this was no different. And so I was able to convince her, even though she did not know my friend's parents, to let me play at their house. And when I knocked on the door, there was Dawn's mom came to the door, and I let her know that I was there to play with Dawn, and she closed the door, and I probably waited for 2 seconds, but in a kid's mind, it just seemed like an eternity. But I knocked on the door again, and Dawn's mom came to the door, Dawn came to the door, and she said that her mom told her that she couldn't play with me because I was black. And so imagine being, a kid of thinking, okay, I'm black and that's a problem. And so when I went home to, my mom, of course, was surprised to see me back so soon, but, I explained to her, what happened. And, it's just one of those moments in time where, when we think we've made progress. And again, this was, by this time, this was probably, early 80s, which in the lifetime hasn't really been that long ago. And I think that, again, going back to the stanza of Same Cooke of, change will come, I am still hopeful. And I realize that those conversations may still happen in households where people are told, kids are told, hey, you can't play with so-and-so because of, and you fill in the blank. But again, I'm hopeful that that change will come, because as we, start to have more diversity and inclusion, and with a lot of millennials, because they are, knocking down the door of, status quo. And so I continue to have that belief in that, hold on to that promise from Sam Cooke that that change is going to come.
Yeah, it's almost, we hope we get to this future where it's so much of a non-topic that, it's not even worth discussing anymore.
Yeah.
I know in the LGBT community, we have this hope that we're going to get to a point where people don't have to come out as gay. They're just, just is, and it's okay. Like, you love who you love. Yeah. Even right now, we have a CSAF nominee who is an African-American male, and that's the headline. Oh, first CSAF, going to be the first African. But why? Why are we talking about that still?
So I'm going to go back just a brief moment, but then we'll come back to your comment that you just made. So I'll add to that, when I think about change, and I go back to my situation with Dawn, it starts at home. It starts at home with teaching kids to ultimately have that respect and human dignity. And it's a golden rule that I was taught when I was young, and most kids are taught, and that is to treat people like you want to be treated. And so, again, it starts at home with just the basic fundamentals, the principles of living. And so if we didn't get it then the first time, then we've missed a generation. But to go to your point about the CSAF, that you're right. It is a big deal for a lot of people who look like me, and for some people who may not look like me. And so at the end of the day, you're absolutely right of when do we get to the point to where we can celebrate people? But until then, until we get the overall embracement of diversity, we'll always continue to celebrate the first until it's just become so saturated in the system where there's minorities to where it's not even a big deal.
Right.
And again, that goes back to that change is going to come.
Yeah. It's almost like that first stanza with the river where it's continuously moving, and it's like we recognize these boundary breakers as they come up. And, with this new CSAF, that's a new boundary that's being broken. That hasn't been broken before. We had the first African-American president. Now it's, we did that. Now the next one probably will be awesome. But it won't be that same conversation because we broke that down.
Yeah, that's right. We broke that barrier.
So going through this song, the final stanza, it carries a lot of weight too, because it goes, there have been times that I thought it couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. And it wraps again with that message of hope in that change is going to come. For me, this sounds almost like legacy. Do you get that same kind of tone from it?
I do, and I will tell you, and I think especially, so I've been in the military now for 25 years, and there have been two distinct points in my life where I've thought about getting out of the military. And I won't go into all the particulars because I don't think we have enough time on the podcast.
But we've all been there, man.
I know. That is so true. That is very true. And, bottom line, we always think the grass is greener on the other side. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, though, I relate this to a story that I remember when I was probably a captain. I was home on leave, and I was at my grandmother's house. And if you can imagine, going to grandma's house, and there's, wood paneling on the walls, and, she has all these old black and white pictures of family, legacy, right? Just pictures of family on the wall. And then there's another wall that has my dad, who was in the Army, my uncle, who was in the Air Force, and two cousins who were in the Navy. And I'm a captain at this point, and I'm looking, where's my picture? And so I asked my grandmother, where's my picture? And, in her sweetest voice, she said, "Oh, baby, you hadn't given me one yet." And so I definitely fixed that. And when I got home, I made sure that that I sent a picture of her, of me in my uniform. But I say that because what gives me the strength to carry on is the fact that, and it's not about me, and it's not about my picture being on the wall, but it's about others who come after me to be able to see someone who looked like them, to have their picture represented on the wall. And so it was significant enough for me to ask my grandmother, "Where's my picture?" Because I'm the only female and the only officer in my family. And that was important to me, so that the generation who comes through my grandmother's house would be able to know that I too can do that. And I think, to associate that to the Air Force, oftentimes we go down the hallways and we see the chain of command, and oftentimes I'm sure people want to know, where am I in this picture, in this line of older pictures that date back to you name it, whether it's the 50s, 60s, 70s, or as recent as the current chain of command. And so it's important for minorities to be able to see themselves in the pictures that are on the wall.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, you look back through history, it's we have the Tuskegee Airmen, but that's such a small piece of our military history.
Yeah, they paved the way. We're standing on their shoulders.
I know. We actually had General McGee here recently.
Oh, that's
and just
awesome.
To meet him and hear his stories was incredible.
Yes.
And the amount of airmen, single striper airmen who got their supervisors to give them some time off so they could come and meet him and just shake his hand and take their picture. I'm like,
that's awesome.
Thank goodness that legacy it's still living with these people, and that story still exists for us.
Yes.
So when we're talking about this song, you made mention to the fact that to achieve this thing that Sam Cooke wants, that to get this change moving, to have this change come, it starts in the home and it starts with the family. We recently had Chief Green here, the AMC command chief, great guy.
Yes.
And he equated supervision, and he kind of caveated. He's like, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but he's like, supervision is a lot like parenting, in that you have to take care of your people. Do you in the context of diversity and inclusion, do you see that need for the family to create that change in the supervisor role as well? In the cultures of our Air Force, do we start making that change within our small families, which are our small units?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to start with, yes, it definitely starts in the family at home, the organic family. And we're a cross-section of society. We know that. We've been told that multiple times, and it's very true. And so what we get from society into the Air Force, if it's not conducive with our Air Force values, then it is very much incumbent upon first line supervisors and all the way up to the entire leadership chain to embrace those characteristics, or the movement, if you will, of having that diversity and inclusion, and to teach our airmen that this is the way, this is how we roll, this is the Air Force way. And I will tell you, I have, going back to that change piece, I have a lot of confidence in that change will come, particularly, as I look at the most recent Senate hearing that came from Lieutenant General Kelly, which is our half A1, and Mr. Federico, who's our SAF MR, in that they did a presentation to the subcommittee on personnel the Personnel Committee on Armed Forces, and one of the things that they talked about is readiness being on the foremost of having the not only just having the right number of folks, but the type of people that we recruit. And one of the things, couple of things that stood out to me was that 29% of 17 to 24-year-old men and women in the United States are eligible to serve in the military, and only one of eight have the propensity to serve. And I'll go on to say too that in this same document, and I encourage you all to read it because I'm definitely pulling out pieces from it, an excerpt, but the biggest piece is just that I want to hone in on is the fact that we have had change with regard to minorities, particularly with women, with African Americans, with Hispanics, over the last 10 years, and the numbers have been single digits as far as the increase. And I will say that, and it's mentioned in the document, that we're headed in the right direction. These gains have been modest, but we need to continue to make greater strides and not slow down on the progress that's been made thus far.
Absolutely. Like even when we look at, so women in combat was a non-factor for a long time, and now we are seeing women start to roll into that. And I came from a combat camera unit, and one of the things we realized is that it was actually really valuable to have women on these teams, because sometimes we go into countries where it's not appropriate for a male to speak to a female, and we need that diversity to happen. And it doesn't even have to be a gender issue. It could be a color issue in a certain country. So having that wide range of perspectives makes us more ready, more lethal. We are seeing a lot of changes right now with religious accommodations, whether it be for beards, yarmulkes, hijabs, and there's some pushback from that, but I'm actually really empowered to see that there's more support for it than there is, the hecklers and the naysayers, which are slowly getting beaten down by the public voice.
And you're absolutely right. I would say, going back to the stat of, only 29% of 17 to 24-year-olds are eligible. If we think about 29%, so that's a small number of our society. And so we have to open ourselves more to be more, inclusive and to be more diverse, so that we can tap into the population of minorities that may not have had an interest in the past. And so, there's been different research firms that have said that whether it's by 2025 or 2045, that minorities will be the majority. So there'll be a flip in our society. And so if we're not actively pursuing minorities now, we're going to be behind the power curve later. And we need those numbers and that population to be willing to serve, because otherwise we're not going to have the bench or the manpower that we need to continue with readiness and to continue with that lethality, to continue being the best Air Force in the world,
or to have the variance in perspective or experience. If everyone at the table thinks the same, our problem solving skills just tanked exponentially.
You're absolutely right.
Having even people from East Coast to West Coast, the way that they operate and think about things and the things they care about are so substantially different, but I value that. My wife and I are very different from each other, and I really appreciate that, because she loves people and she's got a huge heart, and I'm pretty hyper logical and sometimes I forget that I need to think about how people feel. And I'm so glad we have that dynamic, because it makes me a more capable leader and a better human being.
That's right.
And I think that in diversity and that inclusivity, that is what makes us really lethal. We have this breadth of experience that we can rely on.
You're absolutely right. I'm just going to put an exclamation point at the end of that and say yes and amen.
it's the reality. And
right.
I'm super motivated by like where the Air Force is heading with this, and how our senior leaders are handling things, because change is still coming. There are still things that need more attention. But me personally, as someone who served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, who is seeing ongoing policy issues with things such as transgender, I'm actually empowered and I'm hopeful, because I see that we're trying to take the right steps forward. It's not as fast as we would like it to be.
That's right.
But it's still happening.
Change is going to come.
which is more than most people can say, you know.
Yeah. And I will say that, so when I came in 1995, this discussion that we're having now wasn't being had at all, period, dot. And so people who sat around the table all looked the same, and, you know, white males, and there wasn't an issue, right?
Yeah.
And I do air quotes. But now it's refreshing to know that our senior leaders recognize the fact that the reality is that's an issue, because there are voices not being heard that need to be heard at the table, because that will make us a stronger force to be able to have that diversity in thought, and to not be a one size fits all and everyone thinks the same way and acts the same way. That's not what makes us strong. Being a country of made up of diversity, which is what America is what really makes us strong, very strong nation, as well as a strong Air Force. So to be able to have that discussion now, to have programs in place to specifically address diversity and inclusion, is amazing. And again, I mentioned I've been in for 25 years. 25 years. 25 years. It took us that long to have this discussion, and to openly address it is pretty amazing. And so, you know, it's good. And so to continue to press forward with it, and to be comfortable having the discussion is where we should be going.
There's a lot of strength in being able to respectfully and appropriately have hard conversations about things, you know. And I think it's fantastic. So for airmen right now, so for a young officer who may be a black man, or a young airman who may be gay and Jewish, who knows, they see that they don't have a huge representation in the Air Force comparatively with some other communities, and they feel like, you know, we're not making enough headway. And there's a lot of negativity on Facebook. Let me tell you, I run a Facebook page. People be out there saying some wild stuff.
That's why I avoid Facebook and social media.
Yeah, if you want to just see some crazy stuff, look at the comments on like an LGBT event.
I'm good, totally good.
What would you say to these young and up and coming future leaders who are a minority, who may be struggling with feeling included, especially under the guise of some influences where it's like, well, where's my White History Month? Where's my Men's Month? Like, how do we tell them, like, hey, it's coming? Like, what would you say to them?
So that's a loaded question. Loaded because so there's two parts to it. I'll break out the first part being, you know, what would my advice be to young airmen, capital A airmen, whether officer, enlisted, or civilian, who may not want to stick around because they don't see themselves on the wall. And so my advice would be to stick with it, because if they get out, we will never even have the pool for which to pick from, so that they can make it to the wall. And so it's not easy. The struggle is real. It's not easy, but if it was easy, everyone would do it. And so sometimes we're called to do things that are difficult because we have to pave the way. And so we need folks who are willing to continue paving the way for others to come. And that's where I see my role of being where I am today. And so my advice again would be to just stick with it, because once we start having airmen, capital A airmen, separate, then that automatically decreases the pool, and we won't have a vote. We won't be given the opportunity. The other piece that I'll tease out a little bit from your question is the advice from social media with regard to where's my month. And so my advice would be there's 12 months. They can pick one. Whatever month they want. Yes, exactly.
I mean, I'm on board with that. I think there are people in this world, especially in this generation. Like, my young airmen are amazing.
Yes, I agree.
And they have so much passion, and they have so much drive to make it better. And there is 12 months in a year. And if there is something that they feel like needs that attention or needs that advocacy, then push for it, man. Go get your month.
That's right.
In the meantime, you're welcome to share pride with me if you like. We invite everyone. No one's excluded.
And when we look at the reason or the purpose for special observances, it's because a group, and you pick a group. For me, of course, and I'm saddled between African American history for February and women's history for the month of March. So this time is, this particular, it totally is. But when I look at that and how I associate that to my life, it's because, we want to remind society that we're here. We are still here.
Absolutely. And it makes us stronger.
It does.
Ma'am, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this and being willing to take on kind of a sensitive topic. When we start talking about things like race and gender and sexuality and religious accommodations, people kind of stray away from it. But I really value that you came in and you're like, I'm doing it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room.
That's right.
And thank you so much for being the picture on the wall.
Thank you.
As a female colonel and a black woman, you're in a very serious position at Air Mobility Command. You still got 5 years left, I think, right? So sky's the limit.
We'll see.
It's awesome to see people who have taken up that charge and said, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to do it because it's going to be important for somebody else, even if it challenges me along the way.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for staying with us today.
So I will say thank you for giving me the opportunity. And doing a podcast, first of all, is extremely difficult. When given the topic, is, hey, pick a topic. Hey, would you like to do a podcast? Thank you, Colonel Jones. Hey, would you like to do a podcast? And, oh, by the way, pick a topic. And, there's so many things to talk about. That we could have a library full of podcasts on any given topic. But this one is very near and dear to my heart. And again, important for me to have that conversation, to encourage a dialogue. And oh, by the way, I encourage people to disagree, because some of the things that we've talked about, people may not agree. And I'm okay with that too, but we've got to have the conversation. And so I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this podcast.
Absolutely.
It's been amazing.
We'll have you back anytime.
Awesome.
So this has been the Bedrock podcast. If you're looking for more episodes like this one, or maybe you're looking for a completely different topic, you can find the podcast on the Air Force Connect app under the 436 Airlift Wing. Just click on social media right there. You can listen in your car. It's also available on iTunes and Spotify for you for your listening convenience. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.